We're going to be looking at a number of topics today, covering a wide range of call to protection law, in particular procedure, which is specific to call to protection, capacity, evidence, best interest in serious medical treatment, deprivation of liberty, and finally COVID-19 vaccinations, which are obviously topical at the moment. The next case, a mental health trust in ER, is a relatively straightforward capacity case, but I think it's a useful reminder as to exactly what needs to be taken into consideration. So, in ER was a 49-year-old woman with anorexia nervosa. She had a long history of anorexia, having been diagnosed as a teenager. And unfortunately, she'd been repeatedly admitted to hospital on a number of occasions, and a pattern of behaviour had developed where she was simply putting on weight in hospital and then self-discharging. And then once she got back into the community, she would lose that weight again and the cycle would continue. Unfortunately, in 2021, she'd also developed renal failure. And it was agreed with regard to the renal failure that meant that her life expectancy was going to be somewhat limited. And there was a suggestion it was going to be limited really to a matter of months because there was no hope of her obtaining a transplant. So the next case we're going to consider, or the next two cases we're going to consider, are the case of GH and then the second case of an expectant mother. And both of these are obstetric cases that come from slightly different viewpoints. So in the case of GH, this was an emergency application that was made. The hearing actually started at 10 p.m, so it really was quite late. And GH was a 26-year-old woman who had suffered from anxiety and depression and agoraphobia. She had gone into labour 72 hours earlier, but unfortunately the labour hadn't progressed according to plan, and the baby had become stuck. And as a consequence, the clinicians were of the view that she needed to have an urgent C-section and obviously be admitted to hospital. GH refused to agree to that course of action, and it was felt that her agoraphobia was now the dominant player in her decision-making capacity to make decisions.